This is Gemara Horayos Daf Vav, and we're holding on. Hey Amid Beis, we're about 8 lines from the bottom of the Amid. The first word on the line is Rebbe מאיר. And all the learning for this month, the month of Elul, a month in which we can find the Kadosh Baruch Hu so close to us, has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as a Schos Aliyas Neshama for his mother, Esther Reyzel Basar Meir, B'siyata D'Shemaya, the incredible Kayach HaTaira to elevate the neshama of Esther Reyzel Basar Meir in Gan Eden Shel Maila. Says the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda v'Rebbe Shimon. According to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, Shevet Echad De'ikri Kahal Minalahu. Where do we know, based off of segueing slightly from the previous discussion, where do we know that one Shevet is called a kahal, a congregation? Where do we know this from the Psukim? Amri responds the Gemara, D'chsev v'yamud yeshava b'kahal Yehuda v'Yushalayim. It calls Yehuda kahal noichach chotzer beis Hashem achadasha. Once we quote a pasuk in classical Gemara sense, the Gemara asks, "My chadasha? What is chadasha?" Amar Rav Yechanan shechitshu devarim. Chadasha means that they were mechudash, they were mechadesh halachais v'amru, and they said the following halacha: Tfil yoim al yikanes b'machane levia. A tfil yoim cannot come into the machane levia. So that's what the pasuk means by chadash. Says the Gemara, going back to the fact that one shevet has the status of a kahal. Says the Gemara, Maskevlar of Achabar Yaakov. Mimai, from where do you know this? Tell my shiny Yerushalayim. Davinami Binyamin. Maybe Yerushalayim is different because Binyamin was also there. So maybe it wasn't just called Kahal because of Yehuda. It was called Kahal because of Yehuda and Binyamin. Says the Gemara, Yaakov, you're right to say another Mekar. So what is this pasuk refer to? Whom was born at that time? They were calling it a kahal amim binyamin. Shema minos. That's a raya. That this is what the Torah means. And now a new kahal is born, binyamin. So we see a shevet is called a kahal. Amar le Rav Shavaler of Kahana. How do you know? Dilma, perhaps Achi Kamar le. Maybe this is the way to learn the pasuk Rachmana. When Binyamin is born, who to have a Yud Beis Shvatim, there will be 13 Shvatim, Dimis Karyat Kahal, and then it will be called Kahal. So maybe Mamish Hafoch, maybe the only time it's called Kahal is when you have all 12 Shvatim. Asks the Gemara, how do you know that from here that one Shevet is called a Kahal? Says the Gemara, Marlei, so responds Rav Kahana, L'shnei Maser Shift Vatim, Ikri Kahal, 3 lines to the bottom. You're going to tell me that 12 Shvatim are called a Kahal, but Achadas Shvatim lo Ikri Kahal, but 11 are not. That certainly cannot be, as you saw from the previous psukim, and therefore it must be teaching us that when Binyamin is born, Binyamin has the status of a Kahal. So now that we've proven that one Shevet could be called a Kahal, we goes back to the din of Rav Meir, the din of Rav Meir that says the Bezdin themselves brings the Bar Helam Davar Shel Tzibur. Tanya, we learned in a Rייזל Rabbi Shimon Omer Matam Eloymar. What is the pasuk that says Varshini Ben Makar Tikach Lechatos, that a second young bull should be taken as a chatos? Why does it say sheni, a second bull? Im l'lami shem shnayim, there's 2 of them. But look, fine, I already know. V'asas echad chatos, v'sechad oila l'Hashem. One's a chatos and one's an oila. Ella, rather. Yochot einachal chatos l'leviim. I would have thought the chatos may be seen by the leviim. Tamlim upar sheni. Sheni la'ila, second to the oila. That means to teach us that it's some level similar to oila. Ma'oila, just like the carbon oila as we turn over to Vav Amid Aleph, just like the carbon oila, loy necheles is not eaten av chatos. So to this unique chatos, loy necheles is not eaten. Usually, a chatas is part of the carbon, of course, that goes onto the mizbeach. But part of the carbon is indeed eaten by the kayanim. But from here, we would be learning there's some chatas that they have to be burnt. Chutz lamachaneh. From here, we'd be learning that this chatas would not be consumed. Ki yetze by similarly says Gemara Amar Rav Yosi. Habayim me'ashevi. Those who are coming from captivity. B'nei ha'goylei krivo. Oilais, they brought oilais alokei Yisrael parim shem asar hakol oila. Hakol sagadet, they're all oilais. Efsher shechatas oila. So says the Gemara, you know what it means? Could it be that a chatas is an oila? Ella, do you know what the pasuk there is teaching us? 5 lines down, hakol ke oila. Everything is the status of an oila. That what? Ma oila, just like a carbon oila, lo necheles. Av chatas lo necheles. So to this chatas is not eaten. Now why? The Tanya, as we learned in a brayser of Yudah Imer, alvos chavim eviyum. They brought the carbonates for avodah zara, and the carbon brought for avodah zara is going to be similar to these carbonates brought for avodah zara, in which they are inoi ne'echeles. So I'm Rabbi Yudah Mar Shmuel. It's talking about bringing the carbonates for the avodah zara that was worshipped in the days of Sidki Yo. So these were carbonates. They were brought by the tzibur for avodah zara. They were not eaten. Says the Gemara, Bish, Rav Yehuda Mishkachas Dalani Shnei Masar Chatois, Kigon Dechatu Shnei Masar Shvatim. I understand the 12 chatos, that the 12 shatim. Did Aveiros, Vaisi Shnei Masar Seirim, they bring 12 goats. Inami, or else they could be referring to the Chatu Shiva Shvatim, the 7 Shvatim sin, the Visha'ara, and the other 5, Inach Begreira, were brought together because they were Greira, they were drawn along with it. According to Rav Yehuda, we understand. Says the Gemara, according to Rav Shimon as well, we can understand. The Chatu Echad Aser Shvatim, 11 Shvatim sinned. And the 12 carbonates from Bezdin proper. Elo, and here's the Kasha, Rameir, Damra Bezdin, Mevim, Veloy Tzibor. According to Rameir, it's only Bezdin that brings, and not the Tzibor. So the question is, from these psukim, where can we find, according to Meir, that 12 karbanos are brought? Explains the Gemara, you know how, kigayin the chatu, v'hadar chatu, v'hadar chatu, atrese, zimni, they kept sinning again and again, more and more averis 12 times, and that's why they brought 12 karbanos, each for a different time, in which avodah zara was worshipped. Says the Gemara, v'amaisi lu'hanu de chatu, but those who did the Averos Bisman Sitkeo HaMelech have already been Maisu, have already died. So why are we bringing a carbon for someone not alive? In general, the klal is you can only bring a carbon for someone who is living. Amar Papa says, explains our Papa, when the halacha is that a chatas whose owner dies, when that halacha was taught, it's only for a singular person. But the fact that it's a tzibur, the averos will be different. There's no such concept that the tzibur died, and therefore the garban could still be brought. Says the Gemara, it sounds like a novel idea. So you need a makar. Minali the Rapapa. Where does Rapapa know this side that klapi the tzibur there's going to be no misa? On the place your fathers will be the children, which seemingly implies that the children will be in the place of their fathers. That sure feel yachanami, not just in the tzibur. Ella diukadir Papa meseir derish chaydesh. Rapapa learned it out from the carbon sayer of Rosh Chodesh. That what? Amar Achmana says the Torah Maisi Chumas Alishka. The carbon of Rosh Chodesh comes in the Chumas Alishka. I v'maisi leho me Yisrael. Now it could be that in between the time when the monies were collected and the carbon now is being brought from those monies, it could be that a yid was nifter. V'hanech tapaishi. And therefore those that are left, how could they bring a carbon? How could they go along and bring a carbon from that? Elishmamina. So that's a raya. That the owner, that the owner dies. Bitzibur karva could still bring a carbon. That's going to be the mikar. Says Mara, slow down. Midami. Sayar Rosh Chodesh. When it comes to the carbon of Rosh Chodesh, when it comes to the carbon of Rosh Chodesh, maybe no one died, and therefore there's a tzad that no one died, and therefore the carbon is kosher. We know for sure someone died, and therefore, why is this going to be a raya? So says the Gemara, you're right. Let's bring a new mekar. Kaper la'amcha Yisrael. Asher Padisa Hashem. There should be a kapara for Klal Yisrael that was redeemed by Hashem. Reuya kapara zushet chaper al yesim Mitzrayim. This kapara is roi for those that left Mitzrayim. The Pasuk says Asher Padisa, those that were redeemed. So says the Gemara, we see from this pasuk that the carbon Egla Rufa is going to always have a sense of kapara, even for those who left Mitzrayim. From here, the Gemara wants to prove that a carbon brought Bitzibur will have a kapara for prior Aveiros, even though they're not necessarily around, they might have died. Says the Gemara, Midami. Some kulis aninon over there. The Egla Rufa, they all are alive, kulis aninon, and they're all bringing the carbon. So therefore, I'll tell you, me gudim achapre achayim. That once it has the koyach, the power of kapara for those who are bringing the Egla Rufa when someone was killed outside their city, so then it can have a kapara for those who are Yotzei Mitzrayim. But in our case, could be there's no one alive at all. So how do you have a kapara? Says the Gemara, no. There are always some alive, some people around from the Yotzei Mitzrayim. Says the Gemara, V'dilma mu'atin havu. But maybe it was a miyat lo rabma, it wasn't a majority, therefore they shouldn't be able to bring the carbon. Havu. Says the Gemara, Ksev lo yikir b'kol truas hasimcha l'kol b'chiya'am akol nishma ad lemirachoik. And therefore, from there we learn out that if those who are mourning, their cries were so loud, it must be showing us that the majority were those who were in Avilus. So says the Gemara, so you proved to me that there were some of them that were still alive. But ask the Gemara, wait, how can they bring a carbon? It was an Aver b'mezid. Explains the Gemara when they were again going back. We're talking about the Avodah Zarah that was worship. Izman Chizkiah Melech. Says the Gemara, how could there be a kapara if the Avera was b'mezid? Explains the Gemara, you know why? Have a harash shaisa was a psak for the time. Hachinam mistaver. I'll bring you a riot in the second white line. Dilatim achi. If you don't tell us to be ilim tishim, vishisha, kavasim, shivim. Shiva keneged me. What are they going to be keneged? Rasha isa chanami hayrasha isa. That it was a special psakalacha just for that time, and that's going to wrap up why the carbon tzibur was brought bisman Chizkiyahu Amelech, and how their kapara could have even been had for those potentially not alive. Tanu Rabbanan continues the Gemara. Third by line, Meisechem ben Atzibur Chayavin Echem Ibezdin. Chayavim, Echami Bezdin Paturin. If one person of the tzibur dies, then they still have to bring the Paralim Davar. But if one of the Bezdin died, then Paturin, then they're going to be Pater. Every member of the Bezdin has to be alive to bring this carbon. Says Marmantan, who holds his Amar of Chizta, Amar of Zera, Amar of Yermi, Amar of Rameri, Amar of Bezdin, Mevi, and Veloy Tzibur. And since it's a carbon bezdin, helkoch, meisechem in tzibur, chayavim. If one person of the tzibur dies, they are chayiv. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. What's the reason? If everyone in Bezdin is alive, and it's as if they all bring the carbon. Meis echad mi beis Bezdin beturim, but one person Bezdin died their potter. It's like a carbon chata since the whole Bezdin is bringing it. So over here, this would be like a carbon chatas that what? That one person, one of the shutfin died. The halacha is umishamachi beturim. Therefore, they would not be able to bring the carbon at that moment. But mask if Rav Yosef 5 lines on the bottom. V'nokma Rav Shimon. Ask Rav Yosef, wait. But let's say the brisa is shitas Rabbi Shimon. Then Rabbi Bezdin in Matzibur Meisachem and Matzibur Chayavin. That it's a Bezdin with the tzibur. If one of the tzibur dies or chayev, the ein is tzibur meisim. Whereas Meisachem Bezdin Beturin Kidamara and the Chata Shotfimi. So how do we know that it's not shitas Rav Shimon? You're telling me it's Rav Meir, but I'll tell you it can even be Rav Shimon. Amalei Abayo, Shaminoli Rav Shimon. I'll tell you why. Rav Shimon holds Amarchata Shotfim Einoi Mesim. Rav Shimon holds the Chatas of Shotfim is not left to die when one of the owners dies. Rather, it's still a kosher carbon. The Tanya Shitas Rav Shimon is Parvasal Shem Mekibun Sha'avdu V'Hefresh Acheyev Tachteim. We lost the carbon, so we separate another carbon in their place. Yamusu. Then what happens is Kulan, all of them have to die, even the original carbonis that you find. Divi Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon, Omer, doesn't Rav Shimon say, or Imrim, no, you don't let it die, but you let it pasture until it gets a mum, and then it's going to be sold. Why? Because Rav Lazar and Rav Shimon are of the opinion, She'ein Chata Sibor Mesa, we don't allow the carbon to die. Says the Gemara, Amrle Rav Yosef, Kayhanim, Kahamrit. What's your kasha? You're asking about the par of the Kayhanim and Yom Kippur. You're asking like the regular din of a shotfim, of a chato, shani Kahanim tekri kahal. Kahanim are an entity called a kahal. Dechsev al konav kolam yechaper. So says the Gemara as we turn over to Vavam Beis Alamayata. If you are correct, Naisi par b'haydaya. Then their par should be brought based off of the mistaken psak. Then the problem is tafelu shvatim. There'll be more shvatim than Rav Shimon said. Because what did Rav Shimon say? Rav Shimon taught us that there's yud beis karbanais. There are 12 karbanais that are going to be brought. But the problem is that if we're going to be learning over here that there can't be no carbon, then it's going to be 13. So Ela Amar Ravacha Bar Yaakov on the third line of Vavam Beis Shavtu Shifte Shel Levi Loikri Kahal. You're right about Kehanim, but this Levim they're not called the Kahal. Techsev Hinani Mafricha Verbisicha V'Nasaticha Lekahal Amim. And from there we darje Kol Sheish LeAchuza Ikri Kahal Kol Shein LeAchuza Loi Ikri Kahal. And therefore, because the Levim do not have an Achuza, do not have a property, a possession. And Eretz Yisrael, therefore, Loi Ikri Kahal. Says the Gemara, Imkain, if what you're telling me is true, there's going to be less than 12 Shivatim. Why? Because if you're going to exclude Levi, you're left with less than 12 Shvatim. But we clearly said there's 12 Karbanos. Amar Abaye, Ephraim, Uminashe. That you could get rid of Levi and you still have 12. Because Ephraim and Menashe take the place of Yosef, and therefore you have 12 Shavatim. Amar Rava, Voksev al Shem Achem Yikaru Benachal. But the Pasuk says they'll be called with the names of the brother of Menashe and Ephraim, Klape V Yerusha. Lenachala Hokshu V'Leila Davaracher. It's only a din in Nachala. So says the Gemara, it sounds like it's only din in Nachla and not what? A din in the carbon sibor. So how can you tell me that Ephraim and Menashe have a separate status? Klape, the parallel Davar Shal Sibor. Says Marveloi, Vachalukim B'Digleya, but the Galam Akva be true. They have different flags. Says the Gemara, Kanachlosan Kachani Yasam. They encamp like their inheritance, but it's not a kasha on the carbon. Says the Gemara, K'deilak loy kavali. The Galam and other teretz could be that no, it was just to give honor to the banners, but it didn't show that they would bring a separate carbon. Says the Gemara, V'chalukim b'nesiyim. But they have different nisiyim, different karbanos by the nisiyim. Therefore, it should be the same thing over here. Says Marulach loy kavali nisiyim. That's just covered for the nisiyim. That's why they brought a separate carbon. The Tanya Shleima also Zayin Yemei Chanukah. Shleima Hamelech made the 7 days of inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash. Ra'a Moshe Lasos Shneim Aser. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu make 12 days by the Mishkan Yemei Chanukah? K'deilach loy kavali nisiyim. So concludes the Gemara. Ma Yahave Allah. What is the lemaisa? Do we view this carbon chatas like a carbon sibor, like Abaye, or not? Tashemad, the Tanya Rebbe Shimon Aimer. Chamesh chatos, meisais, vlad chatos. There are 5 cases where chatas have to be left to die, and the offspring is also chatas. Utumuras chatas, and if you swap it for another item, a tumura, it's also chatas. V'chatos shemisu b'yalel, and chatos that the owner dies. V'chatos shenischaper by already got the kapar. V'chaper she'avru shenasa, that the year has passed. So says the Gemara, v'yata yachol leimar, you can't say v'lad chatos b'tzibor she'in tzibor mafrishin nekeva. V'yata yachol leimar tumuras chatos b'tzibor. Why? Shein Temura b'tzibor. V'yati yachol leimar chatos shemisu b'yalel b'tzibor. Why? Shein mesim shenischapru b'yalel. Shein mesim shein tzibor mesim. So says the Gemara, you know what's going on over here? Shenischapru b'yalel v'she'avru shenasa. Those last 2 cases, Lai Shamana. I didn't hear what they apply to. Yachol yamusu. I would thought that they have to be left to die. Amrit, so I'll tell you, Yelamid Sasam in Amafurash. Ma motzinu bevlad chatos utmuras chatos. Shemesu bayalel biyachid. What do we find in these cases? Biyachid dvar mamurim. It's only by yachid v'loy b'tzibor. Af. So too. Sheneschaber bayalel v'shavur shenasa is also going to only be referring to biyachid dvar mamurim, but not v'loy b'tzibor v'chidanin. Efsher Mishi Efsher. Rav Shimon, when it's B'chan Makom Kamer, he will indeed darshan such. Hajan Alachai Rebez, in a difficult parak, certainly one that requires Chazara. And let's just begin the next parak, Haschala of the second parak, says the Mishnah. Hayra Ikarin Mashiach La'atzmai, V'kain Mashiach. Made up psak halacha shayging correctly for himself. Also shayging maybe par. He has to bring a par zachatos. Shagav asa mezid. If he made a mistake, but then he did the act on purpose, mezid, or he made a mistake he passed incorrectly on purpose. Also shayging, he realized he did avera pater. Sharas kain mashiach la'atzma ikara bezin letzibur. That's the same status as the hirav bezin for the tzibur. I'll pick it up for the Gemara. Pesiyata dishmai.